My high school conducts a senior project each year to fulfill its charter. For my senior project, I am evaluating how well a person can eat off of a limited budget such as that offered by the food stamp program. I'm evaluating my peers' attitudes toward the program and its implications. I'm publicizing these findings through a web blog and a YouTube channel, respectively. How I landed on this project was really just circumstance. I'd been thinking for a while about what I wanted to do. I was hopping everywhere from philosophy to environmental causes. But my work experience, I worked at a grocery store starting last summer, and it just compelled me because I saw these unfortunate people who were using the food stamps program. They were they were purchasing foods that were not the best for them, and I was really perplexed as to why this is. So, after giving it some thought, my interest quickly shifted to the food stamp program and its practicalities. Our school requires each student to submit a short form as a part of his or her senior project. This short form will include the product or products that the student intends to manufacture during his or her senior project. I didn't pick one single home run product. I picked a lot of side projects. I decided to conduct two sets of 12 interviews with peers in order to get their opinions on the food stamp program and its implications. I decided to I decided to evaluate the health consequences of different diets and vitamin deficiencies. I decided to enact a 30-day meal plan that was based off of a reduced budget, such as that which a food stamp recipient would receive. I decided to track the health consequences that I would experience, and after this was completed, I would go back and create a 10-minute video of my peers' interviews and create a 30-minute documentary of the entire process. This would be supplemented by what I consider to be the centerpiece of my project, which would be a weblog in which I give advice about making the most out of food. I decided to conduct my first set of 12 interviews just as printed interviews, two questions, kind of to get a taste of where people were as far as their knowledge of food stamps, as far as how much effort they would give to answering the questions, how open-minded they were. Just I picked students who seemed to be intelligent and open-minded so that I would receive quality answers and so that I would be able to field students who seemed to have some level of interest in my project. And I did receive some very candid answers. I would not have expected some of the insight that I received from the students that I received it from. However, I am disappointed in the fact that in the fact that people seem kind of resistant to answering my questions, whether it was an incomplete survey, dodging questions because they really never thought about what was mentioned before. It's just, and I didn't receive timely responses. I have people who wouldn't turn in their interviews at all. I'd have people who would wait a month. And just being a deadline oriented person, in my mind, I have a sense of finality about these things. When something is supposed to be handed in or finished, it is handed in or finished. There is no real question about that unless they're like rare circumstances, but that's what happens when you step outside of yourself and you deal with the real world. Things don't always work the way you expect them to work. But anyway, I was able to successfully gauge interest and knowledge through these interviews. And these interviews, there are only two questions again. They were invaluable, though, in crafting the next set of interviews, which were by far more important. After conducting the first set of dozen interviews, I had to really hunker down. I evaluated the diet that I was consuming at the time. I used the Super Tracker government website in order to accomplish this, and I received a detailed nutrients report. That nutrients report revealed that while I was not eating exceptionally poorly, I was eating beneath my standards, and that I was missing several essential vitamins and nutrients in my diet. This was a bit of a revelation for me. My ego takes pride in being one of the healthier eaters in my family, and I've always considered myself to be relatively healthy. So when it came out that I was eating a mediocre diet at best, I naturally felt disappointed and kind of shocked, to tell the truth. If if eating if eating whole grains, fruits, and vegetables isn't healthy, then or healthy enough, then what is? But after applying some of the research that I had collected over the last few months, I made some changes and I created a meal plan that would be more appropriate for a person who is short on funds and wants to be as healthy as he or she can be. And that new meal plan really shook some things up in my personal life. It really got me to lift some stones that I had previously left unturned. With my new diet, I decided to start eating meat again. Since it's one of the healthiest meats available, I decided to eat salmon, and I also decided to regularly consume turkey meat because that is one of the better meats to take in as well, and you can find it relatively cheaply. I decided to cut sugary foods like breakfast cereals, extra juice, things like that, because it really is just a empty cost. You don't gain much from it at all. And I rounded off my cuts with applying plenty of fruits and vegetables. I was eating 3 vegetables a day, and I'm a person who, before the project, I really couldn't be bothered to eat a vegetable at all. I begrudgingly drank maybe a V8 or something just to feel better about my diet, but I really, really did not have a taste for greens. I implemented my new diet on Tuesday, February the 11th of 2014. It's funny because the day before that, everyone hit the grocery store at which I shop in preparation for a massive blizzard. So almost all of the food, all of the bread at least, was gone. The shelves were empty and there were tons of people pouring into and out of the store. So it really, really was a dramatic note to begin my project on. A day or two after I began my project, I actually realized that my diet, while it was great in meeting most standards, it failed to meet 2 standards. My folate level was much too high, but my choline level was low to the point where I did need to do work on it. I felt disappointed because I thought that I went over everything. I double and triple checked to make sure that I was meeting every single nutritional requirement so that I could optimize my diet, but I must have made a mistake. So I had to go back and change the serving sizes of different foods that I ate to ensure that I got adequate nutrition. To compensate for the lack of essential nutrients in my diet, I elevated the amount of milk and the amount of salmon that I consumed. This alleviated the issue. I adhere to routines. I really like to stick to schedules, like to uphold deadlines. I actually managed very well eating mostly the same food for a month. Sometimes I'd shake it up, sometimes lunch would be dinner and dinner would be breakfast, but I stuck to the same general foods and the same amounts. Call me boring, but that's what worked for me. As far as health effects go for my diet, I mean, I was expecting some big time benefits. I don't know why. I guess I was looking at things too crystal eyed, but reading accounts of people who have elevated their strength levels, boosted their testosterone levels, all of these different things, how some vitamin supplements can be quote unquote miracle cures for different ailments, I was just going into the whole thing with really, really, really lofty expectations, which were not met. Although I did experience positive benefits for the most part from eating better. As far as health effects are concerned, I definitely had a boosted sense of self efficacy. A lot of people struggle to get their fruits and vegetables and stuff in, especially people that I am close to. So the fact that I could transition from an average, less than stellar diet to one that is exemplary really made me feel like I could do just about anything in the health realm that I put my mind to. It was really it was really something that was motivating, and this sense of confidence carried over slightly to other aspects of my life. However, it wasn't all positive. I also experienced a sour stomach for about a week or so after I implemented the diet. My body was just so used to take in its carbohydrates as simple, crude, sugary. Once I threw a lot of complex carbs like you find in fibers, which are, of course, abundant in fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, my body was thrown a curveball. It didn't know how to adapt at first, so it reacted the only way it knew how. When it's cut off, it it just couldn't really handle it. So, but eventually I adapted. So it's all water under the bridge now, I guess. Speaking of carbohydrates, I experienced cravings for these simple carbs that you'd find in pastries and candies and sodas because the body's just so used to those. My body wanted the quick release of insulin, and now that I was getting my carbohydrates from more slow releasing sources like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and those sort of sources, my body was going through sorts of withdrawals. Now, these took a little longer to fade than did the sour stomachs, but again, I managed after some time. Overall, I didn't experience any superhuman effects. There was no increased strength, there was no increased mental clarity, there was no increased testosterone, no superhuman, miraculous this or that that you would read about in a natural cures magazine. About all I experienced was a general sense of being healthy, of being more vitality, and that's not anything to complain about, but it was underwhelming because the expectations that I had set were borderline on it. After I finished up with my meal plan, I decided to issue another 12 interviews. I interviewed the same individuals that I contacted the first go around. I interviewed 9 of them through a longer paper interview, and I interviewed 3 of them through a spoken interview set. I went deeper with this next set of interviews, both in the paper and especially in the spoken interviews. As far as the paper interviews go, I asked people about their diets, on their specific views on what they would do if they were put on food stamps, things like that. As far as the spoken interview went, I asked people about their backgrounds in nutrition, that sort of thing, just really delving deeper, kind of getting that personal feel to it. One issue that I noticed, people seem to like to politicize the issue because it has been in the news recently. It's hard to sometimes divorce the food stamps, divorce the politics and the practicalities, and it wasn't too big of a deal, but it just reminds me how inclined some people are to making an issue where there needn't be one. The spoken interviews were by far better than the written interviews. However, with the spoken interviews, I had difficulty getting enough people to participate in the interviews. I was really worried that I wouldn't get enough people to make a 10-minute video because a lot of people were not willing to do a spoken interview. They had their concerns about privacy and scheduling conflicts. For about a week or two, I was really worried that I was going to have to take a hit on my product grade in order to get the project done on time or recruit an underclassman or something to fill in that gap. Fortunately, I had 3 individuals who were willing to be videotaped. I understand concerns about privacy. I do not do social media, no Facebook, no Instagram, no MySpace, none of those programs at all. So I don't blame the individuals who chose not to have their likenesses put on YouTube. And I published consent forms for each of the three individuals who were kind enough to do the interview for me. I made sure that I was explicitly clear about what was going to be posted on the internet and what measures I would take to protect their anonymity in all of this. Again, I really enjoy doing these spoken interviews. There's just a certain human component to the spoken interviews that you cannot find on a written interview. You lose the tone and the body language that make a statement have effect when you just reduce everything to letters and writing. You can't tell what a person really means between the lines. And what I liked about the spoken interviews is that when you're face to face with someone, it's harder to dodge responsibility or back out of commitments that you aren't prepared to keep. Whereas it might take a month for me to retrieve a paper interview, with a spoken interview, there's that element of accountability that makes my job a lot easier. Of course, it's not all about staying on people. I also really enjoyed getting to know the people who I interviewed. In my opinion, getting someone to think is the best way to know who they are. And it may seem like a small thing when you were talking about big things like government programs and public health, but for me it was just something fun that made the project that much more enjoyable. I feel like all of my interviewees did an excellent job. I can't think no one was late to an interview. No one was like repeatedly rescheduling or blowing the interview off. Everyone took it seriously. Everyone tried his or her best to give thoughtful answers, and of course they succeeded. I have no complaints about the interviewees. I'd gladly interview the three people who I did once again. I cannot reiterate enough how helpful my interviewees have been. I have well over 10 minutes of footage of interviews. As a result, I decided not to lump I probably have about 30 minutes of footage. I don't want to lump it all together into one big YouTube video. That really chases away viewers because people are willing to make a 5-minute investment much more easily than they are willing to make a 30-40 minute investment. So I just decided that instead of making one big lump of a video, that I would give each person his or her own video so that each person's unique perspective could be witnessed without it being distorted by someone else's opinions coming before or after. However, the details do lend themselves to the negative as far as actually manufacturing this video goes. Just getting the interviews to happen was a battle in itself. I started out only having access to my mother's camera, which had a abysmal video function. So from there I attempted to borrow a camcorder from various sources, none of which would arrive in a timely fashion, so I had to dismiss that route. From there, I wound up purchasing a GoPro Hero 3. It is definitely one of the best camcorders available at this time. There's no knocking it, however, its zoom feature was unacceptable, and that and some other technical issues led to the GoPro having to be returned. And when I was already on a time crunch, I had to spend time looking for a new camcorder that would more adequately suit my needs. So in the end, I really had to wait until nearly the end, nearly when products were due, to film my interviews. I wound up settling on a JVC model, which, yeah, it works, but I wish it had worked soon. I wish I had found something that works soon. I don't regret using YouTube as my platform because its visibility is second to none. However, I did have my fair share of troubleshooting with the host. In order to get video through to the host, I had to download some software. It's pretty basic software. It's like Movie Maker. It's free and all, but it still was inconvenient. My bigger issues lie in the amount of time it took to upload and process the videos. Since I decided to divide my interviews into 4 chunks as opposed to one very large video, I had to spend 4 times as much waiting, or at least it felt like it, in order to get my videos online. With the trouble that YouTube sometimes has because of its large volume of viewers and uploaders, I was concerned that none of my videos would see the web by the time that products were due. I also had my fair share of privacy concerns as far as YouTube goes. My first name and last name are actually connected to my YouTube channel. This was not my intention, but it's very difficult to maneuver YouTube settings, especially when they're intertwined with Google Plus's own settings. And being on a time crunch, it really felt like trying to recover my privacy at this moment would have been an arbitrary waste of time. Finally, this is a smaller thing. The fair use policy that YouTube exercises, I don't blame them for exercising that fair use policy because I understand the heat that they're under from different record companies and the like. However, it doesn't make it any less difficult for me to maneuver around. I eventually decided not to put music on my videos because I felt that they would be able to stand on their own. But for a while, I was really worried that I'd have to wind up using classical music as the backdrop to all of my videos, and that would not be very intriguing for whatever audience I did attract. All in all, I had minimal difficulty with the 10-minute set of interviews. Where a lot of my difficulty was the 30-minute documentary, which I'm in the process of completing. But I can say that the documentary is cathartic. As awkward as I sound, because I don't do a lot in communications, it does feel good to be able to express some of the nuances of my feelings, because not everything can be conveyed through a journal or through reading annotated bibliographies. Adding that human component before the presentations really does add an extra dimension to my overall project. As far as the issues with this documentary, the major issue that I'm having right now is working Movie Maker. It's a Windows program. The issue with Movie Maker isn't so much that it's insufficient as it's too good. It has too many features to navigate. It's too advanced. For someone like me who doesn't dabble in video making and didn't even have Movie Maker on his computer until a while back, it really is daunting. I have to fiddle with it, worry about it. I've accidentally deleted a few clips. I have to go back, make sure that the right pictures laying over the right audio clip, and so on. So it's a time-consuming process. It doesn't bother me too much because it's not as stressful as the YouTube process where you had to worry about whether your content's going to be posted at all. But still, I don't care for it at all. That's one of the more negative components of the documentary. However, again, I feel positively about being able to express my experiences and express my sentiments without being as mechanical as I might be in a journal or a bibliography or log of some sort. As far as my web blog goes, I wanted to kind of make the content there simple because I could very easily blind people with like science and copy off my annotated bibliographies, but what good would that do? The general audience is not equipped to read
is not equipped to read heavy scientific literature. So that would really just be an exercise in futility. Instead, I decided to be more general, make whatever scientific information that I do present is simple, just easy to digest. However, this does bother me because I'm used to writing in a kind of flowery, verbose style. I like to use big words and I like to have long, 3, 4 line long sentences. So I feel like I'm dumbing down and kind of condescending to my readers to some extent, and that does bother me. However, I enjoy writing in general, so it's kind of a challenge. It's kind of a fun challenge to figure out how you can write something that's universally accessible without alienating people through being presenting something that's too easy to read or something that's so simple that the person could just as easily figure it out for himself or herself. You have to offer something new, but at the same time, if you offer something that is like wrapped in all this scientific wording, its its meaning is lost. All in all, my two greatest regrets in conducting my senior project were, first of all, not being well versed in the technology that I was using. I put off making my documentary and putting my interviews onto YouTube until later on, like right near the end of my project. So, when it turned out that YouTube wasn't as easy to use as I'd expected it to be, and that using Movie Maker would turn out to be a gigantic hassle, it wound up eating away at a lot of my time, and it really bothers me that the aesthetics of my videos, while the aesthetics are nice by all means, the video quality is there, and so is the sound quality. But I feel like if I had been more prepared, I could easily make a 20% improvement as far as the visual pleasantness of my presentation goes, but I guess it's too late for that. However, I can learn from that in the future because I know how volatile technology can be. I can learn from that in the future by making sure that I am wholly capable of whatever technological requirements any particular task that I'm working on at some moment has. And my second greatest mistake is failing to standardize variables when I was conducting my 30-day meal plan. During my meal plan, I changed medication twice, various medications, and I I looked up the effects of my medications as far as nutrition goes, as far as like appetite goes, and if I had to do over again, I would have standardized variables, e- even if it meant that I had to take like another month. I would have standardized my variables and made sure that nothing corrupted my project and that any effect that I experienced could be directly traced to the food that I was eating or not eating. While I still feel like my 30-day meal plan had value and legitimacy, I feel like it's significantly undermined by the fact that I was not careful in making sure that I could attribute all of the effects to the change in diet. I also feel like I've gained immensely from having taken part in senior project this year. I feel like my ability to prioritize tasks and goals has significantly increased. When you're pressed for time like I was this year, like I was working a part-time job, taking college classes, applying for colleges and college scholarships, trying to stay in shape and completing a senior project, you have to decide to some extent what stays and what goes. You can't do everything, especially not in the real world. Once you're holding a 40-hour a week job, maybe you have kids, maybe you have a significant other, things like that. You have to have priorities. You can't make everything number one on your to-do list. And my other big thing that I learned during senior project this year is vocation. Now, I am still interested in nutrition, but right near the beginning of senior project, I decided that I didn't want to be a dietitian. This wasn't so much due to the fact that the subject matter didn't intrigue me as it was just in my situation, for various reasons, being a dietitian wouldn't be realistic. I would have never been prompted to research the route of dietitian further had it not been for just how much exhaustive research I had to complete for my senior project. I mean, I could not leave a single crack or crevice unexamined at the beginning of senior project. I mean, I was just researching left and right, and my research ultimately led me to my new career field of accountancy. In conclusion, I'd simply like to give my thanks. I thank the faculty for their guidance in my senior project endeavor. I thank my interviewees for their full cooperation, and I thank my family for their continued support.